On October 15th, 1987, 12 men walked into a meeting room in Ouagadougou. 12 minutes later, Thomas Sankara was dead. He was 37 years old. He had been president for just 4 years. And the man who ordered his death was his best friend. There are leaders who promise change. There are leaders who talk about sacrifice. And then there are leaders who actually live it. In the 1980s, one African president shocked the world by selling off luxury government cars, cutting his own salary, refusing to live like a king, and telling his people that their future would not be built on foreign aid. 4 years later, he was dead. Shot alongside his closest supporters, his revolution crushed, his vision buried beneath a mountain of silence, or so his enemies thought. Because decades later, the name Thomas Sankara still refuses to die. This is the story of the African leader who refused to be poor and paid for it with his life. Long before he became a president, Thomas Sankara was a young boy growing up in what was then known as Upper Volta, a poor West African country struggling to find its place in the world after colonial rule. He was intelligent, disciplined, curious. But what made him different was not his talent, it was the questions he asked. Why were African nations rich in resources, but poor in reality? Why did independence seem to benefit some people more than others? Why were foreign powers still influencing countries that were supposedly free? As he grew older, Sankara joined the military. But unlike many officers, he was not obsessed with power. He was obsessed with ideas. He read constantly. He studied history. He studied revolution. He studied leaders who challenged the status quo. And everywhere he looked, he saw the same pattern. A small elite living comfortably, a struggling population carrying the burden, and a continent trapped between hope and disappointment. Many admired his charisma. Many noticed his intelligence. But few realized that one day this young military officer would become one of the most talked about leaders in modern African history. By the early 1980s, frustration was spreading across Upper Volta. Political instability had become normal. Governments came and went. Promises came and went. Poverty remained. Then Thomas Sankara emerged as a rising political figure. Young people loved him. Many soldiers respected him. Ordinary citizens saw something different in him, someone who seemed genuine, someone who spoke with conviction, someone who looked them in the eye and talked about dignity rather than dependence. In August 1983, everything changed. At just 33 years old, Thomas Sankara took power. He became one of the youngest heads of state in the world. But this was not just a change of government. It was the beginning of a revolution that would challenge powerful interests both inside and outside the country. And Sankara was only getting started. One of his first decisions was symbolic. Upper Volta would no longer be called Upper Volta. The country received a new name, Burkina Faso, the land of upright people. To Sankara, this was about more than a name. It was about identity, pride, self-respect. He believed Africans should stop seeing themselves through the eyes of others. Then came the reforms. Schools expanded, vaccination campaigns reached millions, infrastructure projects accelerated. Women were encouraged to take on greater roles in society. Forced marriages were challenged. Women's rights became a national issue. These ideas were revolutionary for their time, but perhaps the most controversial part of Sankara's message was his rejection of dependence. He famously declared, "He who feeds you controls you." To Sankara, aid was not always generosity. Sometimes it was influence, sometimes it was control, sometimes it was a chain disguised as a gift. His message inspired many, but it also frightened many others, because revolutions create supporters, and they create enemies. And Thomas Sankara was creating both at the same time. Most leaders talk about sacrifice. Thomas Sankara practiced it. He reduced his own salary. He rejected luxury. He sold off expensive government vehicles. Instead of driving in luxury convoys, he was known for using a modest Renault. While many politicians surrounded themselves with privilege, Sankara deliberately chose simplicity. He wanted people to see that leadership was service, not entitlement. Power was responsibility, not wealth. You cannot carry out fundamental change without a certain amount of madness. And by the standards of traditional politics, many thought he was mad. Why reject luxury when you can enjoy it? Why challenge powerful interests when you can cooperate with them? Why live modestly when you can live comfortably? But Sankara believed that leaders should share the realities of the people they governed. That belief made him admired. It also made him dangerous, because every reform created new resistance. And slowly, quietly, opposition began to grow. Not everyone welcomed Sankara's revolution. Some political elites felt threatened. Some business interests felt threatened. Some foreign governments watched with concern. Sankara was proving that an African leader could reject many of the old rules. He spoke openly against corruption. He criticized foreign influence. He challenged established power structures, and every speech earned him new admirers. But every speech also earned him new enemies. The pressure began to build. Relationships became strained. Alliances began to weaken. And among those closest to him were people who increasingly disagreed with his direction. Some believed he was moving too fast. Others believed he was making too many enemies. What nobody knew was that the greatest threat to Thomas Sankara might not come from abroad. It might come from much closer. From the one person he trusted most. October 15, 1987. It began like an ordinary day. Thomas Sankara attended a meeting with colleagues. There was no dramatic warning, no public countdown, no sign that history was about to change forever. Then gunfire erupted. Chaos exploded. Within moments, the revolution was under attack. Sankara reportedly urged his companions not to resist. According to many accounts, he believed the attackers were after him alone. But the attackers had already made their decision. Thomas Sankara was shot and killed. He was only 37 years old, just 4 years after taking power, 4 years after launching one of Africa's most ambitious political experiments. 4 years after daring to imagine a different future. The revolution's leader was gone. And one of the most shocking parts of the story was who emerged afterward. His former ally and close friend, Blaise Compaoré, took power. The man Sankara had trusted with his life had become the man who ended it. For many supporters of Sankara, it felt like the ultimate betrayal. The man who had once stood beside him was now standing in his place. The years that followed brought dramatic changes. Many of Sankara's policies were reversed. His image became less visible. Discussion of his legacy became complicated. For a time, it seemed as though history was moving on. But something unexpected happened. The memory of Thomas Sankara refused to disappear. People continued sharing his speeches. Young Africans continued discovering his ideas. Students continued debating his vision. His words traveled farther in death than they ever had in life. He said those words just days before he was killed. It was as if he already knew what was coming, and still he refused to stop. While revolutionaries as individuals can be murdered, you cannot kill ideas. And perhaps that is the greatest irony of all. The man was killed. The ideas survived. Decades later, people who were not even born when Sankara died still speak his name, still debate his vision, still ask whether he was simply ahead of his time. Some leaders are remembered for the power they held. Others are remembered for the wealth they accumulated. Thomas Sankara is remembered for what he refused to become. He refused to accept that poverty was inevitable. He refused to believe that Africa's future had to be dictated by others. He refused to live one way while asking his people to live another, and in the end, that refusal may have cost him everything. But perhaps that is why his story still matters, because long after the bullets stopped, long after the government changed, long after the revolution ended, people are still asking the same question. What kind of future might have been possible if Thomas Sankara had lived? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Was Thomas Sankara a visionary leader ahead of his time, or was his revolution destined to face powerful resistance? Subscribe to Statecraft Stories for more dramatic political histories, forgotten revolutions, and the leaders who shaped our world. Because behind every nation, every revolution, and every leader there is a saint.